Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special Frankly Speaking Sports interview here on NGSC Sports Network. It is my great pleasure to now have in with us to talk about several things, including FSU and the college football playoffs and them excluding FSU. It is our great pleasure to welcome in former Clemson head coach from 1999 to 2008 and son of the legendary FSU head coach Bobby Bowden. Let's welcome in Tommy Bowden. Tommy, how you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. We got there's a lot to talk about.
I'll tell
You
you what,
summed it up.
it's amazing, isn't it? Let me ask you this, Coach. It was a little over 24 hours ago. The college football playoff committee decides on the four teams like they do the past few years. What were your thoughts when you heard that FSU was excluded from the college football playoffs?
I batted around in my head for a couple of days before they played Louisville, going through several scenarios. But I finally determined if Florida State wins, there's really no way you can keep them out. And then all of a sudden, when they named Alabama, I was really shocked. I said, "Man," uh,
And you're hearing
but
all
it,
different types of excuses, Coach. One of the excuses that I've heard is that, excuse me, there, the phone went off. Um, One of the excuses I heard was that Travis Jordan's injury kept the committee from not putting FSU on. Yet, like you said, they beat a Louisville team who was ranked, in the top 15 in the country with a third string quarterback. Talk about excluding a team because a player is injured rather than the results of the team throughout the year.
well, the committee, them guys are pretty smart. They themselves an out. They had a loophole, and they had that written in the criteria that you could base it on injury to a certain player might have an effect on the team's quality of performance. And surely Jordan Travis does, but they've got a playoff national championship defense that no telling how much would slow down another's offense. Rodemeyer, he's a quality second team quarterback. So that was the surprise. And we of course dig into the schedule and strength of schedule and who they beat and top 25 teams and teams with winning records. Florida State had a lot on the that would have let them in. But when you look at the injury that was in the criteria, that gave them what they felt like was a legitimate reason. Is Florida State as good with him? Probably not, but we don't know that.
Right. And coach, there's been situations in all sports where the underdogs prevail, a backup quarterback, even a third string quarterback in the case versus Louisville. In your opinion, and of course it's just your opinion, is the criteria broken?
Oh, I think it is. I think there's so much you can look into on and what is the advantage or disadvantage as an injury to or injury of Jordan Travis's quality bring to the how much. And but when you look, if Florida State would have had a mediocre defense and very average defense, I'd say okay, that's probably the best decision. But they don't. They've got a great defense. They've got a defense that's going to give a second team quarterback more opportunities because they're going to create some three and outs. So yeah, I think it's broken, but I think it was left broken by them on purpose for situations like that. Then the politics of the SEC and Texas going to the SEC next year. You got two one-loss teams over an undefeated team. I'd say the system's definitely broken. But as I'm sure you study this. It was it was ACC that was one of the strongest that fought the strongest against an 8 or 12 team expansion. This year, which with Florida State would. So as they say, the chickens come home to roost. They fought it
Yes.
so hard. SEC wanted more teams, so that's unfortunate.
Coach, how much do you think greed played into this decision? And when I say greed, I mean, obviously they put what they thought were the sexiest teams or the teams that would generate the most revenue from the TV ratings and all that stuff. How much do you think that weighed into this decision by the committee?
I think anytime people say it's not the money, it's usually the money. So I think it definitely played a part in it. Is there more probably national appeal with Alabama, what Nick Saban's done, and the market name he's created for Alabama over the last 10 to 12 years? No doubt they thought that they would be a more marketable pick, and especially from a financial standpoint. So I'm sure somewhere down the line they would admit it. But like you said, when you say it's the money, it's always the money.
Yeah, no, no. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Now, Coach, let me ask you this: your dad coached FSU for many, many years, had some great teams, a national championship. I mean, it's a lot different today. In your dad's time, when he was coaching FSU, you would have never seen an unbeaten team in a Power Five school in the ACC not make the playoffs if there was a four-game playoff at that time. It would just be based on rankings. Would it be different if this was a situation in your dad's time rather than in today's time?
When my father was making that run of 14 top five finishes, I don't think will ever be broken from an NCAA standpoint. That's kind of what Nick Saban's been doing for the last few years. Florida State, for years ago when my father was making his run, they would have been the one loss team that would have gotten in. They were so dominant back then, and like Alabama, dominant for the last few years. So I think had they had a loss, and I think their first national championship they won, and they had the second national championship he won. He did not have a loss. He went undefeated the whole year, but he had several teams that would have been one of those lost teams that would have knocked an undefeated team out from a lesser conference or not as an impressive schedule, strength schedule.
Coach, let me ask you this. You've been a coach, you've had some tough conversations, not just with players, but with the team as a whole. You're the FSU coach, Mike Norvell. How do you handle this situation with your players and explain to them? Because your overall goal at the beginning of the season, as you know, is to win the national championship. And they did everything they had to do to get to this point. How do you handle it if you are the coach, and what do you say to your players?
When I watched, and I imagine I don't know if you saw the video of him sitting there when they named and his team in the background when they named out the fourth team, and I watched his head drop, and what would go through my mind as a head coach, I'm sure went through his is how is this going to affect recruiting? Because it's a huge slap in the face to the ACC, and all of a sudden you go into a home if you're Dabo Sweeney going to a home recruiting a top running back, and they do really well recruiting in the state of Georgia. You go in the home of a great running back and recruit him, and our Kirby Smart goes in there from Georgia and say, wait a minute, you want a chance to go to a national championship? Look what's happened to the ACC. So I think, number one, from a recruiting standpoint, it's a huge slap in the face, and it's going to be very negative. So as a head coach, and then also Florida State has killed them in the transfer portal. I don't know what Mike Norvell does, but he has done a great job of attracting high caliber transfer portal guys from wide receivers, defensive line, defensive ends. I mean, the top ones in the country. Now all of a sudden he goes in that same home right after an SEC team, or right before an SEC team. They come in there and say, wait a minute. Oh, you can go down and win all your games. You might not get a chance to play for the national championship. If you're going to jump and go in the transfer portal, go to a school that's got a chance to win a national championship. So as I watched Mike Norvell sit there, and I saw some of his team in the background, just someone got up and went toward the door, and that's the first thing that crossed my mind. This will have other ramifications, and then you got to look at, okay, these four teams that are playing for a national championship. I doubt they'll have any players jump into the withdrawal because of NFL capabilities and injuries. But all of a sudden you're going to look at this Georgia and Florida State not playing for national championship. It wouldn't surprise me if some they've got a lot of first round draft picks on that Florida State team. I'm sure Georgia's got some draftable guys. It's going to be interesting to see how many jump into the NFL, move themselves from the bowl game because they weren't playing for the national championship. So I'm sure those things. I know if I was Mike Norvell, the first thing I would thinking about would be recruiting. Man alive, this is a slap in the face for the ACC, and then the transfer attracting those high quality, high caliber transfer portal guys. And now SEC's got some, and the Big Ten has got some money in the bank going against them.
And you mentioned opting out of the bowl games. What is your opinion? And I understand, I hear people say, well, they got to look out for themselves. They're NFL caliber players. They don't want to get injured and then ruin their stock in the NFL. But my question to you is, are you for or against that? Because in my opinion, you play the season as a team, and you have just as good a chance of getting hurt anytime throughout the season in a game that you do in a bowl game. So I wanted to get your feedback because you mentioned it. What is your feeling about these players opting out?
I'm more old school. There's it's called the team. There is no I in team. Now there is no I in team, but there's an M and E in there, and it's me than anything else. But I'm thinking, man, you've committed to those teams. You've worked hard and sweated and bleed and hurt and pain and injury. You've gone through it for 4 years, 3 years, whatever. Finish the season, finish the team. Don't let your team down. I think more like you along those lines. Now, I've never obviously been a first round draft pick where you got money on the line. But if you go back to the history of college football, very, very few career-ending injuries have happened. Running back at Miami, I remember one year is the only one I can think of that got, I think, in a bowl game that really affected maybe some of his longevity in the NFL. But it just doesn't happen very often.
Coach, I know the transfer portal has some very good reasons for being there. Let's say if somebody had a death in the family, need to be closer to home, or there's situations they got injured and now they want to restart somewhere. But as a whole, is a transfer portal from a coach's perspective kind of a way that is teaching kids the wrong way to handle adversity, and instead just say, okay, if I get disciplined by a coach and I don't like the way he talked to me, I'll just go somewhere else and play?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what's happened a lot. All of a sudden, one of the things you have to do as a head coach, you academically make sure they're on course to graduate, and all of a sudden, a guy will miss a class or skip a class or not turn an assignment or be sleeping in class, and teacher call you and tell you, and you try to discipline them. Well, they'll just take off. You got some minor, maybe drug issues, some minor, but all of a sudden you discipline them, and he takes off. So it really creates some adverse conditions for a head coach. Unfortunately, Frank, it's like the NCAA. It's kind of like the government. When the government gets involved with something, they usually screw it up. And the NCAA, had they had some bounds, had they had some guidelines, had they had some standards on this transfer portal initially, they might have been able to have some kind of structure where it wasn't as right now bad on the team as it is now. But right now, transfer portal they're trying to rein it in and put some more guidelines on it. But I think right now a lot of the guys are probably coming out for money. I think which is a wrong reason.
Yeah, and a couple more questions. I'll let you run, Coach. It goes to my next question. Yeah, it was a beautiful segue there. We mentioned earlier about TV rankings and the college football playoffs and things like that. You have NIL now, obviously, the past couple of years with players now making money off their names. Is the greed, and I asked you this question, I know through a text message earlier, is greed not just with the with the TVs and everything, but with the players as well? Is it ruining college football, and is it what college football is not intended to be?
Yeah, originally 75, 80 years ago, or 100 years ago when football kind of started, now it's up to about 120, 130 years, the playing football was supposed to be a part of the college experience. It wasn't supposed to be the college experience. It was supposed to be a part of the whole environment of education, students, and social life and all that. And I think again, the NCAA, when they didn't put any cap on it, no limitations, it's really created a greedy culture with how much money can I get. And Frank, these players leaving and all of a sudden money being a huge object. What I asked myself not long ago is, where are the parents? The parents are supposed to give their son guidance, wisdom, direction, and some wisdom from age and experience on these decisions, and let them jump from here to here, or maybe take going to the highest bidder. Should they have money? Yes. There's got to be some kind of standard or some kind of cap on it, but unfortunately, the involved parent and is our culture, the way our culture is right now in society. I think it's kind of filtering down into athletics, and I ask myself, where are the parents when they're making these decisions, and why are they letting them make some of these decisions? But it's kind of the way society's gone now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a different world nowadays. I guess the last question to ask you, Coach, is who wins these semifinal games? Who plays in the championship, and who wins it all?
Did you see the video of Michigan reacting to that 4 seed? They thought they're going to get Florida State without Jordan Travis. Did you see that video?
No, I missed that one.
Go Google that when we get off, and go watch the Michigan. Got the big panned out, and they can see all the team in there. And all of a sudden, they're waiting for Florida State without Jordan Travis, and they announced Michigan. And you could have heard a pin drop, and you hear
Michigan,
the players,
Alabama. Yep.
You hear them gasp. And it would not surprise me that if Alabama beats Michigan, and then in the rematch, it's hard to beat a team twice. I think Texas will beat Washington, and then it wouldn't surprise me if Alabama's national champion again. It's going to be interesting, but I know you could have heard a pin dropping at that Michigan room when they announced.
I can imagine. Yep.
Watch that. You'll get a kick.
I will. All right, Coach. Well, I want to thank you so much taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us here on NGSC Sports.
Now, you got a lot to talk about next 3 weeks. Enjoy it. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too.
All righty.
All right, that was former Clemson head coach from 1999-2008 and son of legendary FSU head coach Bobby Bowden. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you very much for joining us today on this special interview with Tommy Bowden. Have a great night.